In January 2013, independent journalist Marissa Crawford sublet a weather-worn Craftsman house in West Seattle while she investigated a string of suspicious cargo thefts at the port. The place overlooked the water, smelled faintly of salt and cedar, and belonged to a tugboat engineer spending the winter on the Bering Sea. Marissa moved in with nothing but her laptop, a stack of court records, and her rescue terrier, Pico. From the first night, she noticed the hall floorboards flexing as if someone much heavier had tested them, yet every room stayed empty. She logged it under old house noises and went back to work. Night 3, at exactly 17 a.m., a sequence of 3 slow, almost hesitant knocks sounded on the front door. 1, 2, 3, followed by a soft scrape like knuckles dragging down the paint. Pico sprang up, hackles raised, but did not bark, as though the air itself hushed him. Marissa peered through the peephole. The porch lights she had left on were dead. All she could see was her own distorted reflection. The next morning, she found a tiny clump of damp river sand on the doormat and a faint, semicircular bruise in the wood, where something round had struck it. On her 4th night, the knocks returned, same time, same rhythm. This time, her phone recorded a baseline hum. Right after the 3rd knock, a sub-audio rumble that looked on the waveform like a heartbeat. When she replayed it through headphones, in the daylight, she heard, buried in the static, a whispered phrase, "Not yet." Creeped out, but skeptical, she emailed the file to a sound engineer friend. 2 hours later, he phoned and told her to get out. He thought he could hear a second voice in the spectrogram answering from inside her living room, though the words were unintelligible. Marissa set up 2 wide-angle cameras, one outside facing the door, another inside pointed at the hallway. On the 6th night, the external camera blinked off at 3:14 a.m. Its final frame showed both new bulbs glowing steadily. The internal camera kept rolling. At 3:17, the knocking came again, but the sound seemed to originate not from the door, but from inside the drywall behind it. Pico cowered under the couch, whining through clenched teeth. Marissa, clutching a fireplace poker, swung the door wide. Nothing, just quiet street, cold stars, and, she would swear later, wet footprints leading away though the concrete looked perfectly dry. A librarian traced the house's first owner, Stevedore Walter H. Drowned 1,947. Neighbors reported hearing frantic knocks at the same early morning hour after his disappearance. The current owner admitted the front door had been replaced 3 times. Each slab bowed inward around a fist-sized, hollow-like water-damaged cartilage. He suggested she pour fresh water across the threshold before bed, an old sailor's remedy. That night, she set a bowl on the porch, let the rain fill it, then tipped the water across the sill and whispered for Walter. The knock still came at 3:17, but only once sharp, decisive. At dawn, Pico slept peacefully by the door, and on the stoop lay a rust-flecked brass dog tag, stamped W. H. D. Marissa ended the sublet early. In a blog entry months later, she admitted the evidence was thin, corrupted video, garbled audio, a trinket that could have washed up anywhere. Yet every January since, at precisely 3:17 a.m., she wakes to 3 gentle knocks inside her chest. She keeps a bowl of rainwater by whatever door she sleeps behind, and Pico still refuses to cross a wet threshold. Goodenow County Hospital, a limestone monolith in rural Illinois, shuttered most of its crumbling third floor in 1995 to save on heating. Only one patient remained, 17-year-old Mason Drysdale, motorcycle wreck, 8-month coma, tethered to ventilators in room 312, better known among night staff as Bed 12, because the aging ward still labeled bays by bed number. Nurse Evelyn has volunteered for the skeleton shift 4 nights a week, eager for overtime to fund her daughter's braces. She told colleagues empty halls couldn't scare a woman who'd done pediatric oncology through a measles outbreak. Her first graveyard shift felt ordinary. Fluorescents hummed, rain pecked the tall arched windows. Mason's monitor chirped a lazy 35 beats per minute. At 12:37 a.m., alarms shrieked, pulse 168, oxygen nosediving. Evelyn stabilized him, then noticed the cartoon giraffe mural outside room 310, now wept rusty streaks that smelled unmistakably of pens. When she fetched wipes, the stains were gone. At 2:04, the long-dead intercom crackled to life with hush. Little baby, every speaker on the darkened floor harmonizing like a choir of rusted teeth. Maintenance swore the wiring had been gutted months earlier. Evelyn argued over the service phone, unaware that Mason's lips were moving. Inside her own skull, as though a headphone rested in bone, she heard the words, "Not my bed." Startled, she rechecked vitals, blood pressure spiked, eyes fluttering beneath lids. The ward lights flickered. Doors 308 through 311 slammed open even though pneumatic closers were locked. Beds she knew had been scrapped years ago now stood beneath extinguished fixtures. Sheets dented by unseen weights that rose and fell in shallow rhythm. In room 309, she lifted a blanket. Nothing lay beneath, yet the mattress sagged with the density of a thrashing child. Air temperature plunged, her breath crystallized. A mobile she hadn't seen before spun above the empty cot, playing a tin-box rendition of the same lullaby. Back in bed 12, Mason lay stiff, eyes wide, gaze pinned to the ceiling vent. The intercom hissed a single word, Evie Elin drawn out, like tape dragged across magnets. A second, younger voice answered from room 309, chanting, "Switch, switch." Protocol dissolved. Evelyn unhooked IVs, unlocked wheels, and barreled Mason into the hall. Monitors in empty rooms crackled awake, EKG tracings jittering across dark screens. Restraints whipped like broken reins. The elevator at the far end dinged open of its own accord. As they crossed the threshold, something small and waterlogged clung to Mason's chest, a toddler silhouette, skin the green-gray of pond algae, eyes lidless, mouth lined with needle points arrayed in spirals. It pressed a webbed hand over his mouth, smiled, and exhaled a gout of frigid breath that smelled of chloroform and lake muck. The doors closed, the shape dissolved into vapor that left frost spiderwebbed across the stainless steel. In ICU, Mason stabilized, and 6 days later surfaced from the coma. First, rasping sentence, I heard you walk every night. Thought you were safe. The board condemned the building in 1996, but urban explorers still trespass. They report that room 312 glows, red at 2, 4A. Lullabies leak from tangled ducts, and anything stolen from that floor reappears weeks later, sometimes delivered back by the thief. Eyes glassy, clothes soaked to the waist, mumbling, bed 12 never sleeps, and it never stays empty. Neighbors swear they see lights in the third-floor windows whenever storms flood the creek, and local legend says if the lullaby drifts across the parking lot, you must cover your ears. That is the ward counting beds, inviting one more body to switch. October 2005 brought violent flash floods to San Antonio. Civil engineering seniors, Louis Mercado and Dana, volunteered with Public Works to inspect overflow tunnels, dubbed the arteries, a concrete lattice meant to divert creeks swelling beyond their banks. Supervisor Chuck Bell tracked them by handheld radio from a truck idling above. At 4:52 p.m., the pair descended a maintenance hatch near Mission Road. 10 minutes in, they reported a child's red rain boot wedged against a grate, sole chewed by current. Louis muttered, "You hear singing?" A woman's lullaby echoing from around a blind bend. Chuck ordered them back. Upstream gauges were spiking. Instead, at 5, one Dana radioed, "Child calling for help. Sounds close." Moving downstream. Contact died at 5:08. Rescuers entered a wider portal half a mile away. Over the torrent, they caught a Tejano cradle song, "Du Armete, my me-o," the vowels blurred like they were sung through water. 40 yards in, they found Dana crawling against the flow, helmet light out, repeating, "Not her, not her," palms flayed as though someone had peeled them with exquisite care. Louis's helmet lay against a snag of rebar. He was gone. Footage from his headcom later surfaced after forensic recovery. It shows graffiti smeared by spray, the lost boot, then a girl perhaps 9 years old ankle deep beyond the spill, hair veiling her face, wearing the matching boot. She lifts her head, every frame corrupts sideways like wet Polaroids. Analysts salvage half a second, a mouth opening horizontally across both cheeks, eyes fused beneath translucent skin, throat distending like a frog's. Then the feed dies. Louise's body surfaced 3 days later, 5 miles downstream. All fingernails were missing, yet the nail beds remained unbroken, as though each nail had been dissolved rather than ripped. Dana told investigators tiny, methodical tugs plucked at her fingers before she blacked out, like someone testing which belonged to me. Today, city crews evacuate drains at the first echo of a child. Even so, during heavy rain, residents swear a voice rises through manhole covers. Ni eched mi otro zapato? Where is my other shoe? The silt around grates sometimes dries with barefoot prints spaced too wide for any living child, as if someone walked on top of the water. A 2020 live streamer entered the tunnels to debunk the legend. Viewers watched him joke. Nice cosplay when his beam caught a soaked girl downstream. He asked where her parents were. She lifted her head, the stream pixelated into green static. Rescue teams later found only his phone. Corners gnawed like rind, scream looping the lullaby's first bar. Since then, the city welds covers before major storms, yet the singing still rides the flood surge. People claim the voice sounds closer each year, as though the arteries are learning new branches, searching patiently for the foot that matches the boot. In May 1982, a pair of river guides, Laurel Jenkins and Mark Callaghan, drove pre-season supplies from Moab to their launch site on the Colorado. Just after mile marker 139, they noticed a lone Forest Service picnic table standing 20 yards from the asphalt, positioned so the bench faced the empty highway. A painted sign on the tabletop read SITELLC, a TCYOURBRE, a THKEEPIT. Because dusk was settling and both smokers wanted one last cigarette, they parked, climbed the berm, and took seats on the sun-bleached planks. Laurel flicked her lighter. The flame shrank blue and hissed out as though a draft rose from inside the wood. Mark tried his Zippo. Same result. Wind was dead calm. Cotton from nearby willows floated straight up instead of drifting sideways, vanishing above the table like flakes funneled into a vent. They joked about desert static, tossed their unlit smokes, and drove on. 30 minutes later, Mark realized his watch had stopped at 7:08 p.m., precisely when they'd first touched the bench. A week later, guiding their maiden trip of the season, they overheard two German tourists discussing Das Tischchen, a roadside table rumored to freeze wristwatches. Back in town, Laurel dug through microfilm and found that the BLM had indeed installed 4 picnic sites along Route 191 in 1977, but removed 3 the next year after a series of disappearances. The 4th, Site D, supposedly dragged itself back to the same spot each time crews hauled it away, as if anchored to a pivot the eye can't see. After the 15th attempt, the chief ranger resigned and the file went dormant. Curiosity trumped caution. On June 14, Laurel and Mark returned at sunset armed with cassette recorders, a Geiger counter borrowed from a uranium prospecting friend, and disposable cameras. They photographed the table from every compass point, touched the bench simultaneously, then announced the time allowed 7:04 p.m. into both recorders. A full minute passed in shared silence, so profound it felt solid. Cicadas stopped. Far down the highway, a semi's engine cut mid-reverend. Mark's nose began to bleed. Droplets hovered in the still air like beads on invisible string, refusing to fall. When the spell broke, they sprinted to the truck. Both recorders contained 6 seconds of them speaking, then 58 seconds of a low, multi-layered voice repeating, "Stay, stay, stay," each iteration lower in pitch than the one before, until the tape fell into sub-audible rumble. The cameras showed nothing but blown-out white where the table should have been, as though the film had been exposed to hard noon light, not crimson dusk. Mark wanted to burn the evidence. Laurel pushed to publish. Before she could draft an article, Mark vanished during a solo scouting run. His pickup was found exactly where they'd parked in May, headlights illuminating the table, engine idling, driver's door open. The Zeiss field camera he always kept on the passenger seat lay smashed in the dirt, with all 17 frames ripped from the rear. In the glove box, police found a receipt time-stamped 78p M and a note scrawled on the back, "One seat left. It's mine now." Laurel left Utah the next morning, mailing the tape to a cousin in Oregon for safekeeping. She never reclaimed it and refused interviews for decades. In 2016, a wildfire revealed shallow depressions in concentric rings around the table, each the length of a human body. Soil packed so tight it rang under shovel taps. Bureau archaeologists declared them erosional curiosities, filled them with gravel, and placed orange safety mesh around the site. 3 nights later, the mesh was folded neatly on the tabletop, and the gravel lay piled in a single mound, perfectly round, 4 feet tall, centered on the bench as though poured from a spout in the sky. Every spring river guides report the same mutation. The mound is gone, but the bench planks now bear new carved names, always the name of someone who disappeared in canyon country the previous year. The carvings are smooth-edged, as if weathered for decades, and new rings appear in the soil beyond the last. Drivers who pull over say their lighters die, their watches freeze, and faint static hums from the wood in a rhythm that aligns with their heartbeat. Local superstition advises never to sit, merely touch and walk on. Yet tire tracks still scar the berm, fresh cigarettes still collect in the dust, and state troopers find abandoned cars pointing headlights at the empty highway, engines clicking as they cool at exactly 7:08 p.m., miles from any signal, the table waiting with room for one more breath it means to keep. In November 2001, Halifax Transit veteran Raymond O'Halloran pulled the late shift on Route 27, a meandering loop that crossed the Harbor Bridge and wound through the half-demolished military housing of Shannon Park. At 1:12 a.m., running 3 minutes behind, he stopped at an unlit shelter outside Block AJ, a building scheduled for implosion the following week. A lone woman stepped aboard, wearing an RCN peacoat 2 sizes large, hair pinned under a naval beret, skin gray as dry ironed. Her transfer ticket, damp and yellowed, bore the date 15 NOV 1969, but scanned as valid. She took the back row aisle seat, ringed hands folded, gaze fixed on the window, even where blackout paint obscured the glass. Each time the bus lurched, Raymond glimpsed twin water stains spreading across her lap, as if something inside the coat were still dripping. He flicked cabin heaters higher, thinking hypothermia. The mirrors, however, refused to reflect her face. A glare like oily film bloomed where her features should have been. Halfway across the bridge, the engine coughed, and every interior light failed except the emergency strip along the ceiling. Raymond radioed dispatch static only. Through the windshield, he saw harbor fog rolling upstream against the wind, low and fast, lit from within by a dull green glow. In that glow, the woman's silhouette lengthened until her head brushed the ceiling, coat hanging like kelp. From the back came a trickle of water, slapping vinyl, rhythmic as a metronome marking half notes. The bus weighed down, the suspension bottomed as though the harbor itself had stepped aboard. Just short of the crest, the front door hissed open on its own. Salt air flooded and carrying the smell of cold iron. Raymond threw the parking brake and strode down the aisle to usher her off, but the seat was empty and dry, the standing water already gone. On the fogged window, Four-finger-width rivulets trailed upward, defying gravity, converging on the stop cord, which snapped with machine precision 3 times. Ding, ding, ding. When the lights returned, he drove straight to the garage. Inspectors found the rear camera's mini DV tape fused to its housing, plastic warped into drips. Digital telemetry logged the weight of the bus, spiking by 510 kilograms between 1:12 and 1:17, then dropping to baseline at 1:18. No passenger manifest showed a fare at Block HH. Demolition crews later confirmed the shelter had been removed earlier that day. A week later, Raymond's supervisor slid an incident report across his desk. Attached was a Xerox of a newspaper clipping, dated 16/1969. WRENC. Sarah Vi missing after midnight plunge from Halifax transit bus. Presumed fallen into harbor during dense fog. The photo matched the woman exactly down to the oversized peacoat. That afternoon, Raymond resigned, citing sudden fear of bridges. Line 27 still runs after midnight, though no driver was slow near Shannon Park. GPS data shows unexplained weight spikes on foggy nights, followed by emergency stop cord activations, logged without human touch. Mechanics say the bilge smell clears by morning, yet every windshield keeps a faint, oily bloom that no solvent lifts. New hires crack jokes about the Navy ghost until their first night run. Most finished the loop white-knuckled, convinced they left the bridge 1 passenger heavier than they returned. The fare still unpaid. For decades, short-wave enthusiasts have chased the ghost of 7B, a number station transmitting from somewhere near the Wash in eastern England. First logged by RAF listening posts in spring 1978, it broadcast on 4.615 MAG every Friday at exactly 23:31 GM T3 minor keynotes on glockenspiel. A child's voice counting to 7 in clipped received. Pronunciation and 63 pairs of 5-digit groups read by an adult woman. Nothing remarkable, except that every confirmed listener has since reported identical auditory after images. Faint counting behind running water, always halting at 7, then recommencing from 1 no matter the total time passed. In 1987, telecom contractor Arthur Pelling climbed the derelict Cold War tower at Holbeach Marsh, hoping to triangulate 7B's origin. His cassette recorder captured a perfect signal, even though his frequency counter reads silent. At the 63rd group, the woman's voice deviated from the script and said, "Arthur, look behind the dish." The tape ends with 39 seconds of wind and Pelling muttering, "There is no dish," before footsteps crunch toward the stairwell and static swallows everything. He was found 2 days later, wandering the mudflats, eardrums ruptured, fingerprints scoured away. The tower was welded shut, yet the broadcasts continued. Cryptanalysts at Cheltenham noted that each 5-digit pair corresponded to grid references along Britain's crumbling sea defenses. Overlaying 20 years of logs produced a spidery contour map of anticipated shoreline loss through 2030, accurate to within meters. More unsettling, the 7-count intro proved to be a reversed spectrogram of sonar echoes from the 1953 North Sea flood, pitch shifted into the range of a child's voice. Whoever ran 7B possessed archival material not known to survive. On 5 January 2007, university students boating near Sutton Bridge reported a pale lattice protruding from the estuary like a radio mast made of bone. Their phone video, uploaded before the account vanished, shows water draining in concentric spirals toward the structure, exposing mud cracked into pentagons. A glockenspiel chime rings across the marsh, though none of the students had a radio on board. Local police searched at low tide and found only deep gouges in the silt, as if a heavy trellis had been dragged seaward. Since 2015, hobbyists note the child's count slowing by roughly 0.7% each year, as if the tape were stretching. At the current rate, the 7th number will never arrive after 2029. The voice will hover forever on 6.9 repeating. Coastal villagers already complain of a tinnitus that rises with the tide, children waking to recite coordinates in sleep, mains water that briefly runs backward at 23:31 each Friday. British Telecom denies anomalies, yet maintenance crews are instructed to wear ear protection when repairing lines within 2 miles of the wash during those minutes. Last winter, the Environment Agency's live tide gauge at Fosdyke suddenly displayed a scrolling banner in plain ASCIIRET. URNTOCOUNTORRRT URNTORSEA the bar blamed. A firmware glitch. 2 nights later, the gauge house lost power. CCTV showed the breaker panel untouched but recorded on the misaligned audio track. Glockenspiel notes echoing inside the locked room. No official body claims the frequency. Nevertheless, thousands tune in weekly, certain they'll catch the message change that ends the cycle. Veterans of the signal warn newcomers to unplug after the 63rd group. Keep the dial spinning. Never let the carrier fall to silence, because silence is where the counting continues unaided. They repeat the unofficial sign, oft whispered by those who have listened too long. We are already between 6 and 7. We just haven't noticed the water covering our feet. In June 1999, Central Florida's talk station, WFLV 860, suffered a 10-second emergency alert system takeover that, on paper, was impossible. At 2:04 a.m., night engineer Dana Lockett watched the EAS encoder's dead display flash crimson, even though the unit had been unplugged for servicing. Mixing board faders froze. A carrier tone droned for 13 seconds, and an unfamiliar, low-passed voice intoned, "This is a message for one listener. He knows which one." It recited a latitude-longitude pair for Lake Jesup, said, "Bring the radio." Then the board unlocked and regular ads resumed. An FC C-sweep found no valid header bursts. The alert had never entered the chain. Still, a ham in Sanford captured it on cassette, and a spectrogram revealed a 17 AG subcarrier, felt more than heard lurking under the voice like a slow heart. 5 years later, junior reporter Dylan Burke drove the station van to Lake Jesup on the anniversary, bringing the same cart machine that held the 99 overnight reels. He parked on a levee at midnight, ran a whip antenna up the mast, and described conditions into a DAT humidity, stifling, cicadas, deafening, no moon. At 2, 4 cicadas stopped, as if plated over with glass. The levee vibrated to the same 17 throb. Burke, unnerved, pressed play on the old cart, rebroadcasting the alert back across the water. The lake answered in kind, the voice now echoing from the darkness itself, one listener present. Come closer. Fog peeled away from shore, exposing 50 feet of slick mud dotted by stationary alligators whose yellow eyes never blinked. The pulse intensified until the van's dash lights strobed. Burke stepped out, mech in hand. A tea-time code shows 3 seconds of blank tape. Then his frantic whisper, its opening red inside, all red. A single word dark preceded broadband static. Searchers found the van idling, antenna bent into the shallows, no sign of Burke. The DAT looped shoreline hiss, punctuated every 13 seconds by sub-bass surges, matching the original alert tone. Wildlife cameras a quarter-mile upriver mistimed exactly then. Their memory cards recorded solid crimson frames. WFLV retired its transmitter, yet technicians swear the old VU meters still twitch on 12 June at 2. 4 needles slamming in 13-second bursts, even with every cable cut. Morning hosts mute monitors at 2. 3 on policy. They say beneath dead air, they can feel damp breath filling the studio, waiting for whichever listener the lake still expects. Toronto's line, 3 Scarborough RT, is the city's neglected cousin, concrete stilts, aging linear motors, and cars that smell of welding flux no matter how often they're scrubbed. The very last train of the night departs Kennedy Station at 23:57, deadheading to the yard after Ellesmere. Veterans call it the Ghost Run. No fare inspectors, no station guards, just one operator, and however many insomniacs miss the 43 bus. On 14 March 2010, that operator was Sukdeep Kaur, a 4-year veteran who loved the solitude of midnight cabs. She performed the usual rituals. Lucky gum stuck to the dash, scarf draped over the dead man pedal to keep drafts off her ankles, headset set to low so dispatch wouldn't startle her. The cars were officially empty, but CCTV showed one passenger in car 2, a man bundled in a blue Arctic parka despite the mild spring night. He sat motionless, hood up, hands flat on his knees, as though waiting for a photograph to be taken. The train glided out, brakes singing their tired soprano. Past Lawrence East, Sukdeep flicked on the PA to announce Ellesmere as the final stop. Instead, the intercom crackled with a voice counting softly 1, 2, 3 up to 11, then fell silent. Camera feed showed the parka man rise. He faced the side doors, placed both gloved palms on the glass, and held them there while the train banked the big curve toward Midland. At exactly the spot where the track tilts 15 degrees, every interior light flipped from sodium white to sickly monitor screen green. The hum of the linear motors dropped an octave, like power sagging, yet the speedometer held steady. The man stepped into the articulation vestibule. Locks were engaged. These doors aren't supposed to open in motion, but footage pixelated into garbled squares. When clarity returned, the vestibule stood empty, doors still sealed. A second later, Midland Station's platform proprioception sensors reported platform load, +1. even though the cameras captured only wind-blown litter. Dispatch pinged a brake fault. Protocol demanded Sukhdeep stop at Midland. She tried first service brake, then emergency, but the console keys felt spongy, like pressing into raw dough, and did nothing. Doors cycled open on their own. Platform lights flickered. Wind howled through the cab, although every window was shut. Station cameras caught a final glimpse of the Parker man strolling northbound beside the train, head down, hands dripping what forensics later identified as a viscous petroleum distillate laced with carbon black printer toner. With each step, he left a splotch shaped like a numeral. Technicians counted 11 before the trail vanished behind a concrete beam. When power normalized, Sukhdeep rolled to Ellesmere, where cleaning staff boarded. They found every seat back etched with hatch marks, groups of 11, carved so deeply foam showed through. Lab metallurgists dated the scratches to hours before the train left the yard. Investigations mushroomed. Did someone hack the onboard data bus? Did a vandal slip inside during layover? Yet access logs showed no unbadged entry, and PRESTO recorded 0 fares at 23:57. Sukhdeep, rattled, asked for a week off. Day 3 of leave, she boarded the ERT as a passenger to prove to herself it was safe. Just before the arrival of the 23:57, her phone clock glitched to 11:57, even though it was 23:49. A feeling like static rose up her spine. She fled before the doors opened. Other operators began to talk. They spoke of a presence that rides between cars on windy nights. A man whose reflection appears only in the yawning dark beyond the windows, never inside the cabin. They would feel him breathing in sync with the train's acceleration, counting softly each time a wheel joint clicked underfoot, 1, 2, reaching only 11 before resetting. Transit control installed new CTVs, upgraded firmware, even slipped a plainclothes constable aboard. Results were identical. The constable watched his wristwatch freeze at 11:57, while every seat beside him blurred on live feed, as if someone invisible were sitting, arms folded, face mere inches from his. Urban folklorists now claim Line 3 is haunted by Nazir R., an immigrant welder who died during the line's 1983 construction, allegedly entombed in a support pylon after a night shift accident the TTC covered up to avoid delays. His time card, they say, ended between punch-ins, frozen eternally at 11 minutes to midnight. There's no record in Union archives, but the tally marks gouged into car interiors keep appearing, fresh even after panels are replaced. Current memo to staff. If the cab clock flicks to 11:57 outside Kennedy, operators must not acknowledge the anomaly. They are to disable the cab camera, stare straight ahead, and under no circumstances glance into the rearview mirror. Reflections tend to linger one count longer than bodies, and something in a blue parka is always standing behind the glass. Before the landslide, Lauren was a clapboard logging town that smelled of pitch and cheap rye. Its lone boast was the Ash Moon Hotel, a 3-story Victorian folly perched above Mirror Creek, named for the pale volcanic dust that made every full moon look like a cold cinder. Old travel ads promised summer evenings, chill enough for fur stoles. Even in August, a novelty that lured Seattle socialites desperate to escape city heat. On 2 March 1934, record snowpack met early thaw. A slab of mountainside the size of downtown Tacoma thundered into the valley, damming Mirror Creek in minutes. Water rose 30 feet before dawn, swallowing Lauren under a sheet of cold melt laced with pulverized basalt. When rescuers arrived, they found only treetops jutting from a newborn lake and a single shingled cupola protruding like a periscope the ash moon's attic vent. Within days, even that vanished beneath the silty mirror. Insurance adjusters paid out pennies. The town's name slipped from maps. 75 years later, August 2009, USGS tasked diver Petra Can with charting submerged debris for a proposed spillway. Ranger Ethan Brody and intern Leela Tam operated the sonar skiff. At 21 minutes into her descent, Petra radioed vertical walls starting 40 feet down plaster, wainscoting. Windows with colored panes. I'm shining through and Ranger. I've got electric light down here. Surface crew assumed nitrogen narcosis until Petra's helmet comm displayed a lintel, ASHA. MO and in hammered tin, still gleaming. Inside, a corridor stretched away, sconces glowing sepia under intact glass. Dust motes floated like snow despite zero visibility outside. The camera swung left, a dining hall packed with patrons frozen at linen-draped tables, hair and skirts drifting in slow currents. Eyes glinted green in the lamp glow. Words trembled out through Petra's mic. They're facing the ceiling, staring at me. Something wrapped her helmet, distinct metal on metal. She screamed, bubbles spiraled. Then the feed turned the color of old tea and cut. Brody hit the winch. The safety line rose slack and severed. Beacon pings showed her still 30 feet below until they, too, blinked out. Search teams dragged for a week. Nothing. 2 days after operation ceased, Petra's backup mask floated ashore at the eastern cove, strap tied into a careful bow. Scratched into its lens were 5 letters, ENTER. Park management closed Mirror Lake to diving, yet curiosity tourists and paranormal vloggers keep coming. Photographs, taken at certain dawn angles, show an impossible reflection, a turreted fey aid, windows ablaze with galilite. Digital zoom reveals silhouettes, pressing faces against glass, mouths round, palms tapping out ASHMOON in Morse. Rangers dismissed them as rogue lens flares, but one Nikon file contained embedded audio metadata, 30 seconds of faint ballroom piano that spectrogrammed into a perfect blueprint of the hotel's floor plan. In 2017, 2 night swimmers disappeared during the Perseid meteor shower. Their recovered phone contained a final voice memo. Waves licking shoreline gravel, Glenn Miller's Moonlight Serenade tinkling underwater, followed by a polite knock identical to neoprene knuckles on brass. The phone died at the lyric, "Save your love for me." Mirror Lake has since acquired rules. No boats after dusk, no amplified music, no staring too long at your reflection. Rangers patrol with earbuds blasting static because, they say, one piano chord is invitation enough. Campers still report hearing elevators cycling through floors that no longer exist. the jangle of a lobby bell, and a concierge's baritone promising rooms freshly turned down. Most heartbreaking are the lost time cases. Hikers set off around the shore at noon, glance across the water at a flicker of orange chandelier light, and wake on the beach at twilight clutching damp reservation cards inked with tomorrow's date. The cards bleed away in minutes, leaving only ash-gray flakes that float upward as if gravity under the lake is reversed. Those brave or foolish enough to snorkel the shallows sometimes surface clutching souvenirs, a tarnished room key, a matchbook embossed with twin crescent moons, a sodden guest ledger page with the next year's entries already filled in. Each item dries to powder within days, but the takers invariably suffer the ash moon chill thereafter, exhaling visible vapor even in midsummer. Doctors diagnose nothing. Thermometers read normal. From the ridge above, Mirror Lake remains glassy and serene, yet hikers swear the water brightens instead of darkens at its center, as though lanterns sway just beneath, waiting for the banquet to resume. On windless evenings, applause carries across the lake, soft but insistent, urging new arrivals to check in, take their seats, and tilt their faces skyward so the drowned can watch them through the rippling ceiling that is for those below, a floor that never quite gave way. Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport's photo archive holds a single eerie strip-labeled gate T14, 12 DC 1964. Frames 141 show routine shots of an iced-over concourse during a blizzard shutdown. Frame 42, however, captures darkness lit only by exit signs and a barefoot woman in a 1950 S hostess coat standing beneath the gate clock at 11:42 p.m. Her arms hang behind her, as if pulled. Eyes catch an impossible flash, and 3 overlapping sets of footprints halo her in melted snow. Retired mechanic Gil Torres, cataloging the negative in 2006, pulled flight logs. Gate C14 had been cleared hours earlier after Northwest Orient 375 was canceled at 6:07. A complete power loss hit the cluster at 11:39. No one should have been there 3 minutes later. Enlarging the photo, Gil noticed the coat's TW a crest and sent it to airport historian Faye Goodnight, who linked it to Alexa Lex Nesbitt, a 24-year-old stewardess who vanished during a blackout at that same gate on 12 Dec 1954. Witnesses then had described Lex laughing and waving at invisible passengers before slipping into an unlit service tunnel. Search dogs followed her scent halfway in, then refused to move. During a 1988 renovation, workers opened that sealed conduit and found an untouched 1953 TWA overnight bag. Inside were maintenance manifests dated 1971-84, all folded into tight triangles and stuffed inside one stewardess pump. One manifest from 12 DC 1978 noted persistent lake water odor in the tunnel despite dry conditions. Ramp crews now call C14 the thin gate. Night janitors that if you mop there after final departure, your radio pipes in a clipped safety demo read by a woman whose mic cuts during the words in case of. Baggage staff report suitcases circling carousel 9 each 12 December. They contain only a single 1950s hostess shoe. Curious archivist Maddie Clark recently tracked down the original Rolleiflex. Museum records insist its back hadn't been opened since donation. Inside lay one undeveloped frame. After delicate processing, it revealed an ice-rimmed window, a submerged footbridge, and a woman's face pressed to the glass mouth wide, either grinning or screaming. Examining the 1964 negative again, Maddie flipped the contrast and noticed faint snow reflections spelling GEET47. No such gate exists. A forgotten 1952 blueprint, found rolled behind a file cabinet, shows a planned C-47 pedestrian tunnel under the active runway, abandoned after 2 workers drowned in a sudden groundwater surge, but left no standing water behind. Lex Nesbitt's personnel file notes crippling claustrophobia, yet lists advanced underwater evac training under skills. Her only medical warning reads, avoid tunnels when possible. Maintenance workers claim the seam where new flooring meets the old jetway still smells of lake water every 12 December after the last flight cancels. Linger there, they warn, and your watch may freeze at 11:42 p.m. If the lights flicker, a pressure drop follows, like an elevator starting down, and you might glimpse in a darkened window or shutter gap a barefoot woman mid-stretch, eyes glittering with phantom flash, beckoning toward a gate that appears on no departure board except perhaps the one still, flickering somewhere below the runway, eternally announcing a flight that never departs.